Hello, everyone, and welcome. I know everyone's at like kind of different stages of this. So I know some people already made dough, some people may just be hanging out, some people have all their stuff ready already, some people may not have all your stuff already. I'm going to there are no real rules here. We're gonna make the dough first, and it doesn't take terribly long. Though I will say I'm working with my hands. So any of you who are actually mixing with your own two hands, you might be with me. And if you've got robots to help you, that's awesome. I'm so glad you have robots. There's two cameras, so my face is here, that's what's spotlighted, and there'll be a couple of there's an option also to see what my hands are doing down here. And then we will hang out for a little bit while the dough cools. I'm going to read you from my brand new book that is my favorite book. It is called Queen Vashti's Comfy Pants. And I just feel like grown-ups and non-grown-ups alike will really appreciate this. So you're all now forced to enjoy it with me. And we'll talk a little bit about fillings, and we'll talk a little bit about Purim. And then when we feel like it's been enough time, which is about 45 minutes, we will make our corners and put things in the oven. And you'll be free to go as soon as we've like formed some corners. But I thought it would be good to at least stay together for the time that we're actually forming hamentaschen. I feel like that's often where people get we have some really interesting shaped hamentaschen sometimes by the end of the cooking experience, I have found. So you want to have all of the things you need. So here's what I've got. I've got flour. Oh man, you're gonna watch me climb now. This is the most embarrassing thing. This is what I forgot to do, Natalie. So here's my flour, and I have a whole other flour, but my flours, you're gonna get to see this whole thing. This is when you're making for me night. Okay. Now I have my flour. And you need baking powder and salt and 1 stick of butter, or 1/2 cup if you're measuring that way. Sugar, 1 egg, 2 tablespoons of milk, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. And use cream because that's what I have and we're going to use it. And the first thing we do is sift the flour and the baking powder and the salt. I have here an old school sifter. It's one of my favorite baking tools. And you want 2 cups of flour in there. And here's what I'll tell you about me and baking things on Zoom. I'm not a professional chef. There are some of you in this room who are. And what I appreciate about you is that you don't seem to be terribly judgmental. And I amateur my way through all these experiences with you. So here we are, getting our 2 cups of flour.
There, no, we got pictures.
Okay. That's 1. That's 2. 2 teaspoons of baking powder. I have a Moisha House like set of teaspoon, tablespoon things, and it's like actually really cute. So because you can make it really long, like it all stays together, but it like turns into a really long thing. Okay, teaspoons of baking powder. Number 1. And
It might be standing a little bit.
What I love about baking powder, this baking powder, is that some branding person was smart enough to make a flat edge to the baking powder so that you can like scrape it along the edge. Like someone had to at some point be like, oh, you're really cool. And I doubt anyone buys their baking powder just because there's a flat edge, but you know, people are picky, so it's possible some do. And then a half teaspoon of salt. So I have 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 cups of flour, a half teaspoon of salt. And then like put it away for a second. And in this big bowl, you put together a cup of sugar, and this stick of butter that hopefully didn't just come out of the freezer. And who actually has a creamer? This is the question. Like, who has this device? Do people own this thing?
Which thing?
C1, this thing. It's like a lot of little knives on a round. Okay, Jean has one. That's not surprising. Sherry doesn't.
I don't.
But Heather does.
I do a pastry blender.
A pastry blender. So I had one of these growing up, and then there was like many, many years where I couldn't find them anywhere. And I only rediscovered it sometime last year. And I think it's because so many places, like so many people now, like have a Cuisinart. And if you have a Cuisinart and like a dough hook or whatever, then you just kind of like let the robot do the thing. But there's something really satisfying about chopping your butter up into little bits over and over again with the flour. So that is what we'll do for a minute here together until it's all creamed together. This action, like this activity in particular of creaming, is very childhood inducing. Like this was how we baked as kids. And by we, I mean me. My sister and I used to play this game where we would pretend we were, it really disturbed my mom, which she didn't tell us until later. We'd pretend we were orphans. And that we had been captured by, I don't know, evil people who made us do their cleaning and cooking. And the result of it was that we would make dinner for our parents, right? And then clean the kitchen afterwards. So she didn't seem to complain too much while that part was happening, but she did seem to be concerned with the idea that we would always play orphans as kids. And we would make dinner for ourselves in a different room, and we called it the doom room. So we'd make dinner and set the table and everything for my parents in one room, and then we would dine in the doom room for dinner. Okay.
Do you think it was because of the boxcar children?
Probably. And the Bobs,
Or like any of those books we read?
Right, like no one in the stories, in our stories, had parents, right? Like Disney people didn't really have parents. The boxcar children didn't have parents. I feel like the Bobbsey twins were taken care of by their grandparents. Like all of these books were definitely about people that didn't have parents anymore. All right, this looks pretty creamed, actually, I would say. So now I've got my butter and my sugar all creamed, and I'm getting the bits out of the middle because you really don't want to lose any of that sugary butter. That's pretty much the point of a Hamantaschen, just disguise sugar and butter in like Jewish ritual and eat it. And then you mix in your egg, milk, and vanilla. So I'm gonna use my egg. See if I can do this without embarrassing myself and getting it. Yes. All right, egg, and 2 tablespoons of something made of liquid. It could be milk from a cow, or it could be milk from an almond. If you milked your almonds today, I usually milk my almonds. And some vanilla, because pretty much everything a person bakes should have vanilla in it, I think, as a general rule. And then you're going to mix all that together. If you were smart enough to get a spoon first, which now I am. Okay, so now I'm mixing. All the things. Oh yeah, this is gonna be totally doable. I was telling Natalie before we did this that I was a little concerned because I haven't actually ever made this recipe by hand, because usually I'm making it at Temple and we have this like gigantic industrial mixer at Temple where we make like quadruple batches. Jean has seen this happen before. Okay, so now I have like a lumpy but connected mush of almost dough. And after all of that is in there, then we add in the sifted stuff.
Is anyone's hands like super soft from this? My hands are so soft from the butter and the sugar.
That'll do it. I don't think I haven't gotten to the part where I do it all with my hands yet. We're getting there. We're almost there.
Oh, I didn't have a special utensil.
Oh. I'm using the mixer.
So Nina, you were what was it called? Your pastry cutter. You are your own pastry cutter.
Yes, I got in there.
Good. Okay. So it's like forming its dough, and truly by the end of this, you really will all be like Nina. Because at the end of this, unless you're working with a mixer, you're at some point gonna have to get in there yourself. So here's the rest of my flour mixture. And are mixing. You know, I love how the recipe says add dry ingredients into wet ingredients a bit at a time. And I was like, I will do half, and then I will do half, and we will figure it out. Ooh, a tiny bit of almond extract, Beth, sounds awesome. I need to get some almond extract. I feel like, but like almond extract, it's like, I feel like people are either marzipan people or not. Like they either believe in marzipan or they like, it's like cilantro. Like marzipan is like a cilantro thing. Like either you're a cilantro person or it tastes like soap. And either you're a marzipan person or like it's the worst thing anyone ever did to an almond and sugar.
I put almond in mine.
Oh, good.
Part vanilla and part almond.
That's awesome. So I don't have any almond extract, but I do love almonds. So I feel like maybe that's in my future. All right, Nina, we're going you style. I'm gonna get my hands in here now. So if you're
Accidentally overflowed my vanilla extract, but I'm sure it can't hurt it.
yeah, no, too much. There's no such thing as too much vanilla. That's probably not true. I'm sure there actually is such a thing as too much. Maybe, I don't know.
A rainbow whisk.
Yeah. All right. So we're getting closer But you want it, if anyone else is doing it by hand, you want to make sure that you're like, that you want to get it all incorporated. So if it's still crumbly, then you're still working. You want to keep going until there are no more crumblies. And if you're scared that it won't get uncrumbly, you can add the tiniest bit more milk or whatever. But I think for the most part, if you give it enough time, you'll get what you need.
This is a very technical baking experience you're running here, Rabbi Klass.
I'm so technical, Andrew Thomas. Let me tell you. You missed
And
the
I
part where I had to climb on a chair to get the flour because I forgot to refill the flour. Are you making hamentaschen with us?
No, I'm just a voyeur. Looking around my house for snacks. Getting ready to sit down and prepare for all of the Purim things on Sunday.
Yes.
Because it's Purim all week long.
Purim just continues. Okay, people, check this out. I have a dough and it is a blobby, to be perfectly professional about it. It is a blob of dough and it is not crumbly, but it's also pretty soft. So we are now going to, if you didn't do this already, we're going to get some saran wrap and wrap it up. And when you wrap it up, I would suggest, Jean Motes taught me this, thank you, Jean, that if you wrap it in the shape that you're gonna need it to be in when you unwrap it to roll it, it will be easier to roll. So we are going to, I'm gonna kind of make this into a like rectangle that is already flattish. So in the past, I would like put this in a, I'd like wrap it in a, I'd like make a dough ball, but a dough ball is just thicker than it needs to be. So here we are with our, all right, with our, my rectangle of dough. And there is just enough saran wrap. If I and see, someday I'm gonna be a professional, folks, but today is not the day that I'll be a professional. Today I'm gonna be 1 inch off from having a perfect amount of saran wrap. All right, so here we have a square of dough, and I'm going to put my square of dough into the freezer. I'm going to put it actually into the freezer, not into the fridge, to get the most cooling effect possible. Avert your eyes when you see my fridge. It is a special.
I don't think you have room.
This is the strangest baking show I've ever watched.
All right. The dough has made it into the freezer. If your hands look like mine, this is what my hands look like. There's a little nice little blob of blobby right there. Take a moment and wash your hands. I'm setting a timer. I'm gonna have Siri set a timer.
Just a little blobby?
Set a timer for 45 minutes.
Hey, Rabbi Klass, ours is really sticky.
Really?
Sticky still?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a lot of stick. Yeah.
A lot of
Can we
stuff.
add flour?
Yeah. Did you put in 2 whole cups?
Yeah,
We think so.
I
How
mean, I'm
strange.
pretty sure I did.
Yeah, I would add some flour then.
Okay.
Master
I
Chef Ella.
found I was having trouble getting to absorb all the flour.
Right. That is interesting. I think there's something to be said for kind of like the texture. I really do mean this, and I don't know why, like I can't give you the reasons, but I do think there's something about the the butter and like how cold or not cold the butter is. And were the butter to be like actually melted, you'd have a whole different situation going on. And if the butter's like super, 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 super cold, then it's really hard to get it to form at all. And the reason we put it into the freezer is actually to get the butter to re-cool so that it's holding things together a little bit more in advance. So Ella, if you had really great, but perhaps like softer butter.
It was room
Super soft.
temperature. For
There
sure.
you go. Yeah, so I'd say a little extra flour is not a bad idea. I'm gonna
Yes.
wash my hands, and then because this is, as Cantor Thomas has said, the most professional of baking shows, I'm going to read you all a children's story, and then we'll have a conversation. One moment, please, while I wash my hands. All right. I'm gonna also really quickly tell my sous chef that if he thinks he's stuck in his room by himself with the door closed so as to not be on screen, he is allowed to come out if you need to at some point. I don't actually know if he can hear me. He may be doing other things, but if a man appears behind me, it's okay. He's supposed to be here. All right. So this book came in the mail. You know, I also just realized that the reason it looks extra fuzzy is because I technically have a background, which is silly. All right. So a rabbi colleague of Cantor and mine wrote another book before this that I actually did read as one of my like story time books. And she just published this book 3 weeks ago, right in time for Purim. And it arrived in the mail yesterday. And I felt like in a world where I live essentially most of the time by myself, and thus don't read books usually to myself, but I have this captive audience of humans, I can read this book. Cantor Thomas has a question.
No, it's just a comment. I'm Statler and Waldorfing the whole thing. I'm
Good.
sorry. The other thing to know is that it's a PJ Library book. It was picked up by PJ Library. It's like the coolest thing ever to know a real life person who wrote a PJ Library book that's being distributed all over the place.
I think it will. I don't even think it is yet, though. Like,
No, it is. I have received 3 copies, 1 at Temple and 2 at home.
Really?
Yes.
So I could have not purchased this, is what you're telling me? I could have just gotten a copy from your house. Well, that sounds about right. That sounds about like my world. All right, here we go. Queen. Okay, so before we start, somebody remind me who Vashti is.
The original queen before Esther.
The original queen before Esther. And why might she be wearing comfy pants? Like, before we start, let's just see if we can get the premise of this.
Because she can relax now.
Maybe she could relax. We'll see. Maybe she's relaxing the whole time.
I just took you off of mute.
All right. Here we go.
I asked you from the front.
Did a Firestone have an additional thought?
No, that was just a child that was upset that I took the phone off of mute and didn't realize it wasn't back on and was yelling at me.
You know, as the children of the world are wont to do. It's possible that I do that with my own mother, and I am no longer theoretically a child. So not minus the muting part. My mom's the one who can't mute and mute. That part I can figure out for her. For the rest of it. All right, Queen Vashti's comfy pants. Here we go. Here's another thing that's great about this. It rhymes. All right, here's Queen Vashti and her comfy pants. In her rumpus room, Queen Vashti sat in comfy pants and a funny hat. She played gin rummy all night long and sang her favorite silly song. And all Queen Vashti's friends were there in comfy pants and braided hair. They told Queen Vashti one by one, "We've never had quite this much fun. How quiet it is without the boys. We're tired of their constant noise. Today we're free from itchy dresses and steering clear of spills and messes." Meanwhile, on the palace lawn, the king had danced from dusk till dawn. His party had stretched on for days. His mind was in a sugared haze. And now his friends were bored and blue. They'd plumb run out of things to do. We could play wiffle ball again. And all the king's advisors then said, the king stood up and said, "I know. Let's make the queen put on a show. Queen Vashti is just down the hall. I'll send a messenger to call." So just a little after 4, a knock rang out on Vashti's door. The messenger declared, "I bring an urgent message from the king. Queen Vashti must at once come down in her finest dress and royal crown and dance for all the king's good friends until his royal party ends." "Now hold it," Vashti scolded. "Freeze! Could he at least say thanks or please?" Queen Vashti found this very rude. She did not like his attitude. She told the messenger, "Please go and tell the king that I said no. And if you could, please do explain. I have my friends to entertain. I will not don my royal crown or change into a fancy gown. I am not in the mood to dance, for I am in my comfy pants." The king was shocked to hear this news. How could Queen Vashti dare refuse? This was to him a crushing blow, for no one ever told him no. The king's friends sneered and stood up straight. "No king should have to sit and wait. Send word to Vashti's room and say she must come down here right away." Well, look at all of the king's grumpy friends. They're wearing kind of funky outfits. I have to be honest with you. There's like a little poncho thing going on here and a half cape. And they all kind of look like they're in their socks. "Make Vashti's friends come sing a tune and waltz beneath the harvest moon, and pour our tea and bring us sweets while we recline on velvet seats." The messenger crept down the hall. He did not like this plan at all. He gently knocked on Vashti's door and whispered what the king asked for. Queen Vashti answered, "Sir, please go and tell the king that I said no. You cannot tell me what to do. I'm royal just as much as you. These sweets are for my friends and me. It's not our job to pour your tea. We are not in the mood to dance, for we are in our comfy pants." The messenger slumped down the hall and braced himself against the wall. The king began to rage and fume and marched himself to Vashti's room. He pounded down Queen Vashti's door and stomped across the marbled floor. The teacups trembled on their tray, but Vashti calmly looked away. "Oh, the strawberries are falling." "You must come dance," the monarch cried. His face burned red with wounded pride. "And I demand your friends come too, or I'll make mincemeat out of you." The queen's friends stood and hollered, "No! We're happy here, and we won't go. We are not in the mood to dance, for we are in our comfy pants." The king's face twisted in a frown. "You're done here if you don't come down. Have you forgotten who I am? Your choice is simple. Dance or scram." Queen Vashti said, "Then that is that," and tipped the brim of her funny hat. "You cannot tell us what to do. So, king, I think we're done with you." Queen Vashti took her suitcase down. She packed her jewels and royal crown, and sturdy shoes and potted plants, and 7 pairs of comfy pants. She told her friends, please, come with me. There's so much world out there to see. Her friends responded one by one. Together, we'll have so much fun. So just a little after 8, the women stormed the palace gate. They left without a backward glance to conquer the world in their comfy pants. Look at all their adventures. They're on mountains and crossing seas and in caves with bats and in jungles with monkeys and on camels and all in their comfy pants. Ooh, and there's a note in the back. I love a good note in the back. All right. Dear reader, there are 2 queens in the story of Purim, Esther and Vashti. When I was a little girl, I always wanted to be Queen Esther, the beautiful and brave young girl who won the king's heart and pleaded with him to save the Jewish people. As a grown-up, I began to also appreciate Queen Vashti, who stood up for herself and said no to the king's demands, even when it meant getting sent away. When do you feel more like Esther? When do you feel more like Vashti? Hold that thought. I'm going to actually ask you to answer that in a minute. Although in the Bible it doesn't say why Vashti refused the king, this story imagines that it was because she had her own ideas about what to wear and how to have fun. There are more questions, but I'm going to stop for a minute because I really loved the questions that we just asked. And by we, I really mean Rabbi Berkowitz, without whom this story would not exist. So I'm going to turn this, I'm going to make this go away for a little bit so that you can't see both parts of me. Tell me, when in your world do you feel or want to feel more like Vashti? And when in your world do you feel or want to feel more like Esther? And what does it mean also, I suppose? That's a question worth asking. What does it mean to, what is it about Esther that is admirable or not? And what is it about Vashti that is admirable or not? And Janice, you're right. We could not make a children's book about how Queen Vashti wouldn't strip tease. So instead, we gave her comfy pants, which I think is pretty genius. There's a great video that a congregant sent to the clergy earlier today that reminds us all also that there's a whole chapter at the end of the book of Esther that we never talk about, where the Jewish people of Persia go on a rampage because the king's decree is not actually, Haman, you're not allowed to kill the Jews because the king's decrees can't be rescinded. All that the king says is that the Jews are allowed to defend themselves. And so there's this bloody last chapter that we never talk about. So there's a video that was sent to me maybe yesterday of a bunch of puppets singing a song about making sure to ignore the last chapter of the book, just in case, because we never like talking about bloody massacres. Esther and Vashti. All right.
Well, of course, Esther is the most admirable because she saves her people. So, of course, we would like to be the hero in a story. But I guess I'm pretty much like Queen Vashti all the time. Although I don't wear my comfy pants, being me means dressing up and wearing my heels. And I'm constantly me when it goes against the norm of what most people do today, because that's me and that's who I am.
Yeah, in a world where everyone wears their comfy pants all the time, perhaps, Janice is maybe my most steadfast, I still believe in clothes wearer. And I have actually, and Janice, you know this, I've told you, but I've appreciated knowing that you get dressed up for whatever occasion you're going to, even if the occasion is happening in your living room or in your backyard or in the dining room, because we're not going anywhere. You like make sure that you're like physically and bodily prepared for the experience that you're going to have. And I think that's really beautiful. And it speaks to who you are. It does. I think we each have our own versions of that.
I think the best of both worlds is obviously to be both of them. One, to be a hero and help everybody, but at the end of the day, to come home and feel like you've advocated for yourself and you stood up for your values and your beliefs, and you are your own hero at the end of the day, because that's really what's important as well.
And I think that's really beautiful, Nina. And it's a beautiful pairing of the two pieces, because I often get stuck in this moment of like, which do I choose? Do I choose to take care of myself, or do I choose to take care of whatever my version of my people is in the moment? And they seem at odds with each other sometimes. And so what you just did is like pair these ideas really beautifully, that like you get to do the hard, brave, important, courageous thing. And that doesn't preclude you from like coming home and putting on your comfy pants. And it might flip, right? Like you might need some time in your comfy pants before you have the energy to go do the big courageous thing, right? Like that version, like that understanding of it is true too. And you can't always do both those things. Sometimes like what you need for your mental health and well-being or physical health and well-being is to know that your capacity is comfy pants. And that's powerful in its own way too.
I think if you don't stand up for yourself, then you will have trouble standing up for others. So you have to be able to stand up for yourself before you can stand up for others sometimes.
I agree.
I like your kitty cat.
We were just
Thank you. That
also, Beth, over here.
What? There's one right behind me there, and one that keeps coming up on the couch, and I have two others roaming around somewhere.
I had a wedding meeting today, and 4 or 5 times the couple's cat like crawled onto one of the couple's laps and like started licking his face voraciously, would not stop licking. And we're like trying to have a conversation about their growth areas and their strength areas. And like Abby the cat really wants to be part of the conversation. It was cute.
So when I was a kid and learning about Purim growing up, Vashti was made out to be someone who was really bad because she wouldn't obey the king. And I don't know if it's just that times have changed, so now we don't view her that way, or if it's just because I'm older and now I look and say, well, good for her, not just agreeing. But it's interesting just to think about the difference in perspective. And I don't know how much is, due to my being older, or how much is due to just how society in general, views the role of women.
I bet both of those are part of it. And I also think that there is a time before women's voices were nearly as significant a part of the rabbinic and like scholarly in general conversation around this. And the sages, right? Our commentaries tend to not be particularly interested in Vashti for good or for ill, because she isn't the focus of the story, but the commentators do prefer people who do what they're supposed to. And so the idea of somebody not doing what they're supposed to is like not particularly interesting for them either. But all those commentators for centuries and centuries and centuries were not women wearing comfy pants, let's just say. And now there are scholars in 2021 who sit in their comfy pants and study this stuff and are able to see a different perspective. Janice?
I always thought that she was a good person, because had she not chosen to disobey the king, then Esther wouldn't have been put in a position to save her people. So I had always thought of her as doing the right thing, or the thing that God wanted her to do, because it was in his plan to save her, for Esther to save the people.
I love that version. But yeah, I think it's, Laura, you're right? That like there was a lot of, I do think that Vashti got a bad rap for a long time. I think it has shifted. I think it'd be interesting to, I'm sure there's an article out there that covers that shift. But I imagine it's sometime in the last 20 to 35, but really 15 to 20, and maybe just 5 years that there's been significant shifts and conversation about Vashti. You know, I think there's a long time where there were a couple of biblical women that we paid attention to, and a bunch of biblical women that are named, but that we don't have very much of their story in the Bible. And so we just didn't pay attention to them, or for various reasons, they were vilified because they were troublemakers. And in recent years, there's been a lot more work done and studies done and dreaming done also, right? Some like storytelling about these women who no one had really spent a lot of time on previously, to try and like help give these women their stories and their voices in a way that the text didn't in the beginning. I'm going to ask the next set of questions. Let's see what they are. So I'm going to ask these questions, and what's interesting is like it's a children's book, so the questions are asked in a way that I think is like works for kids. And I think sometimes when grown-ups hear questions that are made for kids, they think that they're too old to answer these questions. But I bet we're not, actually, as I'm looking at this. Okay, so when have you wanted to do something different from what everyone else wanted you to do? Right? Like that's a question made for kids, but I bet we can think of times ourselves as grownups. When have you stood up for yourself? And when have you gone along with the crowd? Why is it sometimes hard to be different? So take a second and think before you answer. And while you're thinking, a great suggestion from Natalie to preheat your ovens to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. All right. So I'll repeat the questions one more time. When have you wanted to do something different from what everyone else wanted you to do? When have you stood up for yourself, and when have you gone along with the crowd? Why is it sometimes hard to be different? Those are 3 big questions. You can choose to answer any one of them or all of them. Up to you. Ooh, I had to think of an answer myself. This is kind of a silly answer, but it's the first thing that came to mind, so I'll share. And then if anything else comes to mind, you're all welcome to share. So for a number of years, I had been planning with a friend of mine to bike across the country, which most of you know I did while I was in rabbinic school. And we got close to the time, and the only time when you're in seminary, when you're in rabbinic school, and I imagine this is also true in cantorial school, you go to school during the school year, but there's like lots of very smart professional development things to do during the summers in between. That might be true for any grad school. I don't actually know. The only kind of school that I've been to recently is rabbinic school. But so every summer there was something that it made sense for me to do that furthered my schooling, right? That like furthered my education. And in the year between my second to last and my last year of school, I was supposed to work on my thesis. And when I told my professors and the director of the program and all these people that I would not be working on my thesis because I was instead going to be like just biking all day, every day for 2.5 months, I got like incredible pushback from a number of professors who got very concerned that I was not going to be able to do the work that I needed to do, that I wasn't going to get the thesis done, that whatever merit could be found in biking across the country, it was not the equivalent of what I was going to need to do in order to finish school, essentially. They were really concerned. And I did anyway, in part because I'd already made the plan, and I'm not good at changing plans. So once I've like decided that I'm going to do something, it's very hard to get me to go left when I've already like started turning the car right. And I remember I talked a little bit about that experience of the bike ride in my senior sermon at like the last time that I really spoke publicly at school. And the things that bike ride taught me. And one of those professors who'd been very, very concerned and really recommended that I not do the bike trip came up to me after hearing that sermon and apologized. And realized that like I think he probably knew this, but he was able to see the ways in which like that was its own kind of learning and experience that also was going to be good for me and who I was as a person, even though it wasn't directly connected to like translating Hebrew into English.
I have one to share.
Go for it, Beth.
So I grew up in a super tiny conservative temple, and my bat mitzvah year, I was the only girl. And prior to that, girls were only allowed to do Havdalah services. You weren't allowed to really be on the bima. And they did services in the oneg room for the girls. Like the girls didn't even go on the bima for Havdalah. And that just wasn't gonna fly with me. So I was the first girl to do it on the bima. I led the whole Shabbat service on Saturday. And then probably for like the next 3 years, I led services on Saturdays on the bima.
Oh, wow.
That's badass, Beth.
Yeah. I don't know where she went, but
she's right here. She's right here. Well, I am curious, like, what was it about your 13-year-old self that was like, hell no, I'm doing the thing?
Well, we like lived at the temple. My dad was the president of the temple at the time. And it was like, that's where I spent all my time. Like, I'm going to do what I want to do when I'm here. Like, this is my house. Like, so, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm also filing that away to have you come talk to B'nai Mitzvah students at some point.
It was, and then I got the Jewish War Veterans Award. Like, I think I was 16 and they gave it to me.
Oh.
Yeah. It was really cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah. And then they tore my temple down because all the members died, so.
That's the problem with small
Yeah.
towns and little Jewish communities in the middle of, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I was on Long Island, but still.
Yeah. And the condensing and the, yeah.
Yeah.
It's an interesting, that's a whole tangent that we won't go into right now, but there is something really interesting about kind of the way that Jewish people and populations have moved over time toward and away from major city centers, essentially.
They all just merged together and became giant congregations. Yeah.
I have a similar story. So when I went on Birthright, on the packing list, it said bring a tallis for when you go to the wall. And I didn't know that didn't mean if you're a girl. And I had a tallis, I had my bat mitzvah and I was so excited. the first person in my family, nobody else, my mom, my dad, my sister, they never been to Israel before. And I was like, I'm going to bring my tallis. I'm going to go and represent. And I brought prayers from friends and family to go to the Western Wall. And when I got there, I take out my tallis and my leader is like, oh, I didn't realize that, you know, it was for guys only to wear their tallis. And I said, you know, I brought it all this way with me. It's in my backpack right now. I really just want to like put it on and feel the moment of being there. So we actually saw Sarah Silverman or whatever. She's like a comedian. She was there that day, and she actually got in trouble for doing some advocating to have people light the menorah, have a menorah on the women's side. But anyways, long story short, I took out my tallis, I wore it, I did my prayer and made sure no one around me was like too distressed. You know, I got some looks, and then I put it right back in my book bag and went on my way.
That is braver. I mean, I think you know actually how brave that is. If you've never been to the Western Wall, it might be hard to know how brave that is, but doing things that we consider to be just part of what Judaism is for us at the Western Wall in Jerusalem, it's a lot braver there. Let's just say singing, right? So women, the sound of women's voices is not approved in the ultra-Orthodox world, and even sometimes in the Orthodox world. And so the idea of women praying together loudly on the women's side, that alone is difficult for people. Ooh, my oven is preheated. Is everyone else's oven preheated? That's exciting. Winnie.
I danced and sang at the Western Wall. It just happened that the only time that I was there was a major anniversary of the Women of the Wall. But it was really, really an exciting experience. And there were young girls, and as a longtime feminist, I just felt so good.
So Winnie, do you think you have more Vashti or Esther in you?
I don't know. You know, I was thinking about it. I don't know. I think I've always pretty much done what I wanted to do.
Good. That's amazing.
And there's things you don't know. Like, do you know that I became a Jew when I was 79 years old? So it took me a while. But
also a brave move.
But you know, it was a major move, and I don't know if that qualifies that I was that old when I finally got around to doing it.
I'm 29 and I just started.
We take anyone who wants it whenever they get there. Everyone's journey is their own journey.
Do you want to, the interesting part of my story, I think, is that I met with the rabbi and I said to Dina that I thought I had become a Jew. And she said, I think you're right. And then I went home and I told Art that I was going to become a Jew. And Art was not real happy. And I'm not going to say he was unhappy, but his point to me was he wanted to be absolutely certain that I was doing this because I wanted to do it. That it wasn't because I was married to him, that it was to be, and I think he realized by that time that that really was true. But nonetheless, that's my story about becoming a Jew, which is maybe, I suppose, was a little bit unusual. Because the other part of it is realize that I really came out of a background of atheists, not very religious people.
Yeah.
So
it was a move, like it was a shift. It was a choice, and it was an active choice. And you waited until you were ready to make that choice. Like, yeah. I think most things you've done in your life.
because as I've said, I was actually baptized a Catholic, but then my family, they were atheists. So at any rate.
And then you found the Jews, and we're not so bad. So you
Well,
hung out for a while.
Well, it was an interesting journey. So at any rate. So maybe the only other thing that I did was by going to Nepal. And that was the story there, was that I'd come home every night and I'd look at these brochures about Nepal, and Art finally said to me, look, if you want to go, go. And I said, are you sure? And he said, yes. And then when my daughter was driving me to the airport, I'm thinking, what am I doing? And then, as you know, the end of the story was how many times we went to Thailand because I had gone to Nepal.
And right, like all these things, I was thinking about this recently, all these things lead, all the moments of our lives lead to each other. There's a story that's a little bit sad. I'm not going to tell it particularly well, but there's a story that I read at some point that's in some commentary somewhere, about a man who teaches his, I think it's some teacher, and he teaches his follower, all of his students are whining about how hard their lives are and how difficult things have been. And he tells this story of once having been given the chance to trade places. He says, once I was complaining too about the difficulties in my life, and God was like, all right, come with me, and took me to the tree of sorrows. And I could see on every branch, there was a different sorrow, a different pain, a different difficult thing that had happened. And God said, here, trade. Like you can give up all the things that have happened in your life if you want, and take anybody else's instead. And in that moment, the teacher realized that it was his own struggles that had made him who he was. And I think that's true also for the joys, right? That it is all the different pieces of how we experience the world that allow us to become whoever it is we become. So we are the experiences that shape us into whoever it is that we then turn into over the years. And if you pull out any one of those puzzle pieces, like something's missing, I think, because everything to a certain extent leads to the next thing. I feel like we're close, though my timer is going to go off in like 5 to 7 minutes, but I think we're close enough that I feel positively about rolling some dough. So,
boys, it's time to make the cookies.
All right. So you're going to get your dough
Yes,
out of the freezer. And I'm going to turn on my video again so you can see this next piece of what happens. All right. So I like to put down some parchment paper to keep things from sticking as much. And you're also going to want to get another thing of parchment paper to put on your cookie sheet. Two parchment paper. And then you got to roll. Oh, no. We'll just do that for now.
So Rabbi Klass, I just muted you, my fault. Do we put flour on the parchment paper before we put the dough down, or do we just put the dough down?
You can put a little bit, and I'd say like Ella, because like I'll talk specifically to Ella and anyone else who had sticky dough. If you've got particularly sticky dough, a little bit of flour sprinkled on the parchment paper is good. You don't want too much because this recipe, like, the ratio is really important. I'm going to use just half of my dough to roll out first. So I'm going to break it in half and put the rest of it here. And then I'm going to put a tiny, tiny bit of flour also on top. Just a smattering. And then I'm going to use my very, very professional rolling pin. It's a half-used bottle of wine. And I'm going to start rolling. Someday, I'm going to own a real rolling pin. That's my promise to you. And you're going to go slowly enough so that you want to watch it a little bit, because this dough, you'll see it like cracks around the edges, and you want to keep it together so that you have some cookie space. Roll out dough, and the recipe says you want it to be about 1/4 of an inch thick. And that is true. You don't want it to be too thin. I mean, you don't want it to be too thick, because that makes it hard to form your circles and then your triangles. But you also don't want it to be too thin, then it won't stay put very well. So
Mine's so hard, it won't do anything.
Yes, you gotta go slow. So you'll see, like, there's still not too much here, but you'll get there eventually. You want it to, because you want it to warm up just enough to get thin enough without warming up so much that it gets floppy again. It's a hard balance. I don't know if my microphone is picking up on this, but can you hear like the wine sloshing in my wine bottle as I'm rolling? It's pretty funny.
I was going to ask if you have to use an full one or an empty one.
I usually use an empty one, but I'm out. I have no empties right now, and I don't actually have. I usually have like a full one as well, but I also don't have any full ones. So sometimes you go halvesies. All the more reason. This is like a very Purim appropriate rolling pin, I will say. Maybe I'll finish the bottle later tonight. That'll be the rest of my Purim celebration. Okay, let's see. Let's see what we got. I'm getting close. How are people doing? Do I feel like people have got their dough rolled?
How thick do you want it, or thin do you want it?
So 1/4 of an inch is the, not that I have a ruler to prove that with. What's a better way of, I'd say like, well, I was gonna try and give you like a fingernail measurement, and then I was like, my fingernails are not, you don't want to see them. And some of you have real nails that are lovely. So like, what is that thin? I don't know. I'll show you when we get there. I'm close. All right. So, and then, so I have this is the cup that I'm using. I did measure this. It is exactly 3 inches across. I know the recipe called for 2 inches. 2 inches is also good. And you're going to just make yourself a little round. And I will show you. Oh. What that round looks like. All right. So here's my round. And here's the thickness, if you can tell. And who knows, this may be too thick, but this seems about right to me. And then I'm actually going to get a little bit of water. That is part of the secret of hamentaschen shaping. Get a little bit of water. Janice made a number of people, not just me, some beautiful jelly for Rosh Hashanah. And I have been saving it on purpose ever since for this moment. This is her first fruits grape jelly. And I think it's such a cool thing to get to use first fruits jelly for Purim.
It's real good if you mix peanut butter with the jelly in the Hamantaschen. I did mix the two together and it was really good.
I am so excited. So what I'm doing is I'm going to do a couple that are just grape, a few that are just kumquat. I made some kumquat jam earlier this year, so we're going to use that. And then once I've made some that I can keep peanut free, then I'm going to make some grape and peanut butter mixed ones, which I'm very excited about. Okay, now here is a difficult part. You want to not put too much jelly in there. So I'm putting, like, there's maybe a teaspoon of jelly on this Hamantaschen right now. And then you're going to form the edges very calmly. So I like to pin, I'll show you with this one. I'm gonna pinch the edges together, just the top edges. I probably underdid my jelly because I was trying to be so perfect for you. Okay, so here's my little Hamantaschen situation. And if you are seeing little cracks around the edges, which sometimes show up, or if you want to really make sure that it's sewed together, then you're gonna put a little water on the seam. And that water is gonna help keep the Hamantaschen closed.
Has anyone ever had Mrs. Richardson's hot fudge with coconut oil in it? That's what I'm gonna put in the middle.
Ooh, wait, say that again, because I only heard half of that.
Make a peanut butter and fudge one too.
Yes, that sounds amazing. All right, so I've officially made one Hamantaschen. I'm gonna make some more now.
I made some apple pie filling, and I'm gonna try filling some with apple pie filling.
Oh,
See how that turns. I think they might be too wet, but
apple pie filling sounds like so good for this. They really are just little pies, aren't they? Like Hamantaschen are just tiny little pies. Little one-person pies. One-person ear pies. Has anyone read the articles? There's always an article every year that like some expose on the Hamantaschen. And this year it's that the one that I was reading was that a Hamantaschen is not actually connected, was not originally actually connected to Haman's anything, ears or hat. It was like a mispronunciation or a like play on a word that meant like a poppy seed cookie, and the poppy seed cookie had a similar name, and then so they like made a pun by using Haman instead. All right. Checking to see if anyone else. All right. So we'll hang out here for a few more minutes while we are making our last, forming our Hamantaschen. And I feel like I should remind you, particularly because Cantor Mary was here earlier, that there are a couple of other Purim celebration options for you this weekend. Namely, we have some crafting potential on Sunday at 10 a.m. And I believe, regardless of whether you are a child or have any children in your home, you are allowed to participate in the crafting. And I think if you go to the Gateway, you might be able to download something to use for that crafting. And then at 11, we have our spiel. And the thing you should know about our spiel is that it's tropical themed. It's like a choose your own adventure, tropical themed spiel, which means you have to come like ready for the tropics, whatever that may mean to you. So I know Rabbi Nichols purchased a pineapple costume and I'm very excited to see her in all her pineapple finest.
That fish, they can throw it off.
Yeah, there you go. I was thinking about like some version of like a palm tree situation. I don't know, haven't figured it out. So this is, I've never made a filling myself before. And I didn't originally make this thinking it would be a filling, but I did learn how to make kumquat jam this year. This is one of my COVID skills, is how to make kumquat jam. And I'm like supremely proud that I get to make hamentaschen out of this kumquat jam. I have no idea whether it will be good, but it's really just fruit and sugar. Like, how can you really go wrong?
It sounds.
All right, so I know we got apple pie filling. We have cheesecake filling. What other fillings are going on here?
I made a lemon curd.
You know, I was gonna ask if lemon curd was good. It can be baked, I guess. right?
Apple pie filling sounds good.
We made lemon curd a couple weeks ago and it was delicious with blueberry.
We're doing chocolate chips and caramel sauce.
Oh yeah.
I did blackberry and pineapple and pineapple passion fruit.
Pineapple passion fruit.
Yes.
Your marshmallows.
I've got apricot preserves and maybe cherry pie filling, but I'm struggling with this dough because it's really sticky.
We have apricot preserves too, and that cheesecake filling.
Wow.
Whose dough is really sticky?
Mine, Lori.
Lori.
Yes.
That's so frustrating. Was it in the fridge or the freezer?
Yes.
That's even more frustrating. I'm sorry.
And it was fine when I started rolling it out, but I don't know, it got really soft quickly.
It does get soft. I will say it does get soft quickly. That is one of the, that is a truth.
I might actually put one cookie sheet in the oven and then put the dough back in and let it freeze a little more.
I think, yeah, I think that's actually, I would say, so I was just, as you were saying that, I was looking at my half of the dough that I didn't roll out yet. And I'm thinking might be smart to put it back into the freezer while I'm finishing forming these. And for sure, the like discarded bit. So like, as you're rolling out the dough, you end up with like the reuse stuff. And that that can definitely go back into the freezer while you're working and let it recool.
I feel like hamentaschen could be like connected to equality and love because it's open to anyone's jam.
It is
on the inside. Everybody,
and, for years, this really many years, our Keshet committee made hamentaschen at the temple for a whole week, and then that hamentaschen was sold to support the Temple Bethel booth at the Pride Festival. So it actually has kind of been a symbol of equality at our temple for a long time, but we never had this beautiful midrash on why, Nina. I feel like this is your branding marketing skills at work here. I love it. All right, Hamantasch. Anybody moving faster than me and already got something in the oven?
Almost.
Okay.
Yeah, we just put ours in.
Yay. We might get to like see a couple before we go. Who knows? You should, I would love. This is my ask of all of you. Post your finished product in the, if you're in the Congregants Connect page, particularly post there, or just post on your own Facebook page and tag Temple Bethel, because I love seeing when we did this with the challah, like almost a year ago now, which by the way is a crazy thing to think about. But it was so cool afterwards to see people's challahs and like the different shapes and like what people, I don't know. So I'd love to see what they look like and how they come out and how they taste, of course, which actually matters more than anything else, regardless of what they look like afterwards. If they taste good, that's the point.
Can you talk a little bit about, you just mentioned the challah thing. I saw something online about something else with challah. It sounded like we were going to bake a challah and then give it to somebody else in the temple and trade or something. I wasn't sure what I was reading.
Lisa, you're like the best plant I ever could have planted without having planted you. Yes, so we are in just over 2 weeks, which seems frighteningly soon, going to deliver a challah to every single Temple Bethel family. Every single address that we have for a congregant, we are going to deliver a challah, a homemade challah to be particular, right? We are not just buying a bunch of challahs and giving them away. We are inviting congregants to make challah and then drop it off at temple. And so if you are a baker, your role can be to make some challah. And if you like to like drive, but you can't bake to save your life, which isn't any of you because you're here, but it may be other people in your household, then you can sign up instead to deliver challah. And the goal is just to have a day where we all get to connect around like tasty treats. And I also think that there's just something really lovely about getting a challah delivered to you that somebody made with their own 2 hands, that's part of our community. So that's the basic gist of it, Lisa. And there's more specifics, right? So if you are dropping off challah, there's a certain day by which we kind of need to get them, and there's a best time to drop them off at temple. And if you're delivering, then you've got to be available on Friday the 12th so that you can deliver them that day. But you could, if you want to try your hand at challah making, or if you already are a challah baker, you can sign up online and you can commit to 1 to 20 or even more challah if you're feeling very ambitious. I know one person who's making 60. And
I saw that.
Get them to
Are they going to come teach us how they make so many at once, or are they just baking all day long between now and then and they have a big freezer?
They might just be baking all day long, but I think they've got some people on the call. I don't want to call anybody out here. This person has been baking challah for a while now and has made a bit of an art out of it. So it is part of their family's Friday ritual these days to make double, triple batches of challah, and the challah that comes out is sometimes smaller than you might otherwise imagine. Like, it's not a huge challah, but I know that they one time donated, or not donated, but like delivered, I think over 100 challah, chalot in one day. They were just really excited about it. So yeah, I'm looking But Natalie and I are actually the ones kind of holding this for Temple that we are all participating. And I know both she and I would absolutely love to convince you to make as many challah as you feel like you possibly can, because
I added the link to the chat box
Yay!
for
Okay.
that might be interested. You don't want to go look for
Rabbi Klass, these are some of my hamentaschen from our tribe. On Sunday, we made them.
Yay!
And
I'm also
the
back.
pineapple ones.
Yes.
Nice.
Oh, they look so good.
We ate all of ours.
Well, it's just me. I took them into work to give to people, but
Same here, all the hungry boys ate them. They're all gone.
This is my first batch ever.
That's awesome.
Hey!
I mean, some of them fell off, but you know. First time ever found to happen.
Amazing. So the trick I'd say to like having them really stay together has a lot to do with like the water and also the getting them to get like closing them up all the way. Like closing them all, making them really, really close to the top. But then also, depending on where your butter is in terms of its softness or not in the dough, sometimes they get really, they like really melt while they're baking. So I'll be excited to see what the texture is afterwards. If you've got like crunch or softness, who knows? All right, I'm gonna put these in. Then set timer.
yeah, lovely.
15 minutes. All right, my friends, I'm going to let us head out into our night. Thank you so much for joining me for this. In part because I really like seeing all your faces, and in part because I definitely would not have gotten around to making Hamantaschen otherwise, and it's so much more fun to do it with all of you. I really do want, I'm not kidding, I like really want to see how they turn out. So I'd like full reports on Facebook or in email at some point, just because I'm curious and really want to hear how it goes. And I really appreciate all of you being here. So thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good rest of your night. Happy Purim also.
Happy Purim.
Yes,
Happy Purim.
Bye.
Bye-bye.